Vandeham Shri Guru Shiyata Parakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shirupam Sagrajatam Saganaragantam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Paran Sahagana Lalita Shivishkam Vitamscha Om Agyana Timarandasya Gyanajana Shalakaya Chakshuran Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripasindubhyevacha Patitanam Pavenibhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah Namo Mahabaranyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namane Gauratavishe Namah. So we're reading from Sri Chaitanya Bhagawat by Vrindaban Das Thakur with translation by Sarvabhavana Das, and this is Antya-khanda, chapter 8, the Narendra-sarovara water pastimes. The Narendra-sarovara water pastimes. All glory to the Supreme Godhead, Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. All glory to Sri Nityananda Prabhu, whose appearance has purified all the three worlds. All victory to Sri Gauranga and his followers. Anyone can develop bhakti simply by hearing the pastimes of Sri Chaitanya. Now hear about the arrival in Nilachala of all the Vaishnavas led by Sri Advaitacharya. As Ratha Yatra, the chariot festival of Jagannath, drew near, many great Vaishnavas began pouring into Sri Puridam. Sri Chaitanya had instructed his followers to come every year for the Ratha festival. Therefore, this year, led by Sri Advaitacharya, all the Vaishnavas from Bengal arrived. Some of the notable Vaishnavas who came were Srila Sripad Thakur, in whose home Sri Chaitanya performed kirtan; Sri Chandrasekhar Acharya, in whose house the Lord danced in the mood of Lakshmi Devi; Sri Gangadas Pandit. Simply remembering him destroys all karmic reactions. Sri Pundarik Vidyanidhi was jubilant as he entered Nilachala. Sri Chaitanya weeps in joy just thinking about him. The expert performer of kirtan and dance, Sri Bhakteshwara Pandit, was in the group. The Lord also danced to his ecstatic kirtan. The great soul Sri Pradyumna Brahmachari also came. Lord Nishinga conversed with him often. Srila Haridas Thakur was in ecstasy as he arrived in Nilachala, and the other Sri Haridas who lived on the seashore also came. Sri Vasudeva Datta, who by the Lord's desire is able to purchase Krishna, also came. Sri Chaitanya's personal singer, Sri Mukunda Datta, and Sri Shivananda Sen, along with his family and friends, joined the merry band of pilgrims. Srila Govindanandana was immersed in bliss the entire way. He is capable of purifying all directions. Srila Govinda Datta, the main singer in the Lord's party, was jubilant. The writer Sri Vijay Das was there. The Lord had manifested his bejeweled arm to him. Sri Sadashiva Pandit, who was always in the purest of consciousness as he was now upon arriving in Puri. Nityananda had stayed a long time in his home. Sri Purushottama Sanjay was happy to be in Nilachala. As a mere child, he was blessed by Sri Chaitanya and was one of his main students. Sri Sriman Pandit also chanted all the way. He would carry the burning torch while Sri Chaitanya danced. Srila Nandanacharya also came feeling great ecstasy. His home was the first place Sri Nityananda had visited upon his arrival in Navadip. Sri Shuklambar Brahmachari was in bliss. Sri Chaitanya had begged for prasadam from him. The perfectly renounced devotee of Sri Krishna, Srila Sridhar, was most happy to be there. Vishwambar had drunk water from his broken pot. In addition, there was Sri Bhagavan Pandit, in whose body Sri Krishna had appeared. Two other personalities who directly resembled Sri Krishna, Sri Gopinath Pandit and Sri Garbha Pandit, were in the group of pilgrims. Accompanying them was Sri Vanamali Pandit, who had the divine vision of a golden plow and pestle. Two great devotees of Sri Krishna, Sri Jagadish Pandit and Sri Hiranya Bhagwat, were thoroughly relishing Krishna Ras on this pilgrimage. The Lord, in his childhood pastimes, had called for Ekadasi Prasadam from their home. Sri Buddhimanta Khan was a respected person. He lived only to execute Sri Chaitanya's orders. The person whom Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu affectionately called Father, Sri Pundaracharya, was also there. The noble and detached devotee, Sri Raghava Pandit, in whose home the Lord stayed secretly, was happily entering Nilachala. Doctor of the soul, Sri Murari Gupta, in whom Sri Chaitanya secretly resides, was there. Sri Garuda Pandit, who was unaffected by a poisonous snake bite by continuously chanting Harinam, was there. Sri Gopinath Simha, whom Lord Chaitanya called Akrura, also came. Two other beloved devotees of the Lord, Sri Rama Pandit and Sri Narayan Pandit, were in the group. Sri Damodar Pandit went to pay his respects to Sri Sachi Mata before he undertook this journey. The Vaishnava followers of Sri Chaitanya are innumerable, and surely it is impossible to know all their names. Without exception, all of them were feeling great jubilation as they neared Sri Nilachar Puri. Before starting the pilgrimage, Srila Dvaitacharya had first taken the darshan of Sachi Mata. After offering his humble respects, he proceeded to Nilachala with a large group of devotees and family members. He carried with him a lot of foodstuffs and useful articles favored by Sri Chaitanya, which he knew about from his previous visits to Puri. The entire way he led his group in loud ecstatic kirtan, purifying the whole atmosphere of the land. In fact, their loud jubilant chanting sanctified the entire three worlds. Sri Advaita was accompanied by his wife, sons, servants, and maidservants, who were eagerly desirous of seeing Sri Jagannath and again meeting Sri Chaitanya. Along the way, wherever they halted and sojourned, that place was transformed into Vaikuntha. Only Sri Anantasesha could possibly attempt to narrate the wonderful and auspicious activities of the devotees on this pilgrimage. Countless devotees in small and large groups streamed toward Nilachala. When they would reach Kamalapur, from where the temple spires and flag of Lord Jagannath would be visible, the devotees, overwhelmed with joy, would offer obeisances and weep in bliss. When Sri Chaitanya realized the devotees were arriving, he felt a strong urge to go and meet them even before they came into Puri. When news of the impending arrival of Sri Advaitacharya reached the Lord, he immediately sent Mahaprasadam to greet that party at Katak. The divine love of Sri Chaitanya and Sri Advaita for each other is extremely wonderful and boundless. The Lord would be heard often saying, "I was in my mystic sleep upon the ocean of milk when I was woken up by the loud calling of Nada, Sri Advaita. My present incarnation is due mainly to him." For this reason, all the Mahantas, the exalted spiritual preceptors, greatly respected Sri Advaitacharya. So when the news reached Mahaprabhu that Sri Advaita and his party were nearing Nilachala, he instantly set out with his beloved devotees to greet them. Accompanying the Lord were Sri Nityananda Prabhu, Sri Gadadhar Pandit, Sri Puri Goswami, Srila Sarvabhauma, Sri Jagannananda Pandit, Sri Kashi Mishra, Srila Swarup Damodar, Sri Shankar Pandit, Sri Kashishwar Pandit, Sri Bhagavanacharya, Sri Pradyumna Mishra, Sri Paramananda Puri, Srila Ramananda Roy, the servant of Mahaprabhu, Sri Govinda, Sri Brahmananda Bharati, Srila Rupa Goswami, Srila Sanatana Goswami, Sri Raghunath Vaidya, Sri Shivananda Sen, Sri Narayan Pandit, the eldest son of Sri Advaita, Sri Achyutananda, Sri Vaninath, Sri Shiki Mahiti, and an endless number of the servitors of Sri Chaitanya. Everyone, big or small, was floating upon the waves of ecstasy, oblivious of the external world as they accompanied Sri Chaitanya. Sri Advaita Acharya's party met Sri Chaitanya's party at Taranala. As soon as Sri Chaitanya had crossed the Narendra-sarovara, he saw Advaita's approaching party at a distance. The Vaishnavas of both parties fell to the ground and offered obeisances. The Lord, upon seeing Sri Advaita, could not check the tears that welled up and cascaded to the ground. He fell flat upon the earth. Sri Advaita beheld the Lord of his heart from a distance and offered repeated prostrations. Ecstatic symptoms like profuse weeping, shivering, power, swooning, horripilation, and roaring, etc., were manifest in the Vaishnavas as they repeatedly offered prostrated obeisances. And horripilation is horripilation is when the hairs of the body stand on end. All of them were fully immersed in the ocean of Chaitanya Ras, and without exception all chanted the holy name and offered obeisances. Just like everyone else, the Supreme Lord, Sri Gaurasundar, Sri Nityananda, Sri Advaita, were all repeatedly offering prostrations. The sky reverberated with their ecstatic chanting and joyous weeping. It is not humanly possible to describe this extraordinary scene. Only Srila Vedavyas and Sri Anantasesha are able to narrate this event in detail. Sri Chaitanya rushed to Sri Advaita and clasped him in a tight embrace as tears of joy drenched his body. Sri Advaita continuously uttered verses glorifying the Lord, beaming with happiness. He forgot all about the articles and foodstuffs he and his party had carried with them. Rumbling like thunder, he simply repeated, I brought. The devotees began to loudly chant the holy name, which then echoed in all directions. What to speak of the Vaishnavas, even others who had come just to see what was happening, became so immersed that they also loudly chanted Hari, Hari, and wept in unrestrained joy. The Vaishnavas were embracing each other as they wept and chanted. Each Vaishnava offered obeisances to Sri Advaita, knowing that he was the cause of Sri Chaitanya's advent. Meanwhile, the whole assembly of Vaishnavas was engaged in a mammoth Sankirtan. Devotees were singing and dancing everywhere. Some devotees were rolling on the dust, unable to check their ecstatic feelings. Sri Chaitanya entered the midst of everyone and joined in the exultant dancing. Nityananda and Advaita were locked in a long, affectionate embrace. Soon they also began to dance like intoxicated lions. Sri Chaitanya then went around embracing the Vaishnavas in great jubilation. Sri Gaurasundar, the Lord and Master of the devotees, the captive of his devotees, the life and soul of his devotees, was now crying like a child, hanging on to his devotees with his arms around their necks. Just then, by the arrangement of Lord Jagannath, hundreds of prasadi flower garlands and much sandalwood paste were brought to Sri Chaitanya. Sri Gaurasundar was overwhelmed, and he offered the first garland to Sri Advaita Prabhu, placing it around his neck. He then went around personally garlanding all the Vaishnavas and personally smearing Lord Jagannath and personally smearing Lord Jagannath's sandalwood paste on the different parts of the devotees' heads. The devotees were so moved by the compassion and humility of Sri Gaurahari, that they raised their hands and began to loudly chant the Lord's holy name while weeping in joy. They avidly begged, falling at Sri Chaitanya's lotus feet, praying, O Lord, the only boon we ask of you is that we may never forget your lotus feet life after life, whether we are born as human beings, animals, or even birds. Meanwhile, the lady Vaishnavas observed the ecstatic event from a distance and wept in bliss. Incessant tears of prema flowed freely, for they were all embodiments of the Vaishnavi Bhakta. They were all embodiments of the Vaishnavi Bhakti devotional potency of the Lord. Sri Chaitanya himself has commented that in the matters of spiritual knowledge and Bhakti Yoga, the lady Vaishnavis are equal to their husbands. Still dancing and performing Sankirtan, the Vaishnavas followed Sri Chaitanya as he led them into the city. Whosoever saw them was spontaneously attracted and experienced joy under the influence of the prema bhakti that exuded from each Vaishnava. They had walked but a short distance from Ataranala when they reached Narendra-sarovara. Right at the moment, the festive procession carrying Sri Madan Mohan arrived at the Narendra-sarovara lake on the occasion of the Chanda Yatra of Jagannath and Baladev. Amidst loud chanting, the blowing of conch shells, the rhythmic beat of mridanga drums, and the clanging of cymbals, and the high-pitched sounds of reed instruments, the procession halted on the banks of the lake. Hundreds of colorful festoons and flags were flapping in the wind. Many priests were fanning the deity of Lord Madan Mohan with chamara and peacock fans. The only audible sound was a combination of many instruments and loud voices, all reaching a crescendo as the party of Sri Madan Mohan mingled with the Sankirtan party of Sri Gaurasundar. Now the Sankirtan party swelled in ranks as everyone joined in the jubilant chanting. The excitement and ecstasy were palpable. The excitement and ecstasy were palpable, as if the bliss had been personally transported from Vaikuntha. All this was taking place simply by the transcendental arrangement of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Sri Madan Mohan, which is the festival deity of Jagannath and Sri Baladev, was placed on the boat as the devotees. Sri Madan Mohan, which is the festival deity of Jagannath and Sri Baladev, was placed on the boat as the devotees fanned him with chamaras. The Supreme Personality, Sri Krishna Chaitanya, was greatly satisfied to observe the boating pastimes of Sri Madan Mohan and Sri Baladev. Well, I believe that the deity is Sri Madan Mohan. Okay. The Lord, because it says Sri Madan Mohan and Sri Baladev. The Lord with his many devotees then dived into the Narendra lake. Now listen attentively how the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Gaurasundar, sported in the water of Narendra-sarovara, just as in his previous incarnation of Sri Krishna, the Supreme Lord, as a child, had sported in the waters of the river Jamuna with his young friends by holding hands and forming circles. Similarly, he now sported with all the Vaishnavas holding hands and forming circles in the Narendra-sarovara. In Bengal, people play a certain game in the water known as Kaya, and this was the first game the Vaishnavas played. They called out Kaya Kaya while clapping their hands upon the water surface. This sounds like a musical instrument. The Vaishnavas were overcome with the spiritual mood of the young cowherd boys of Gokula, and the Lord was their master, the Prince of Gokula Gopal. All the Vaishnavas were experiencing great ecstasy, and they became oblivious of the external world. Without fear and inhibition, they began to splash water upon the Supreme Lord. Then a water battle between the Lord and Sri Advaita took center stage. Each splashed water into the face of the other with great force. Sometimes the Lord seemed to be getting the better of his opponent. Sometimes the Lord seemed to be getting the better of his opponent. At other times, Sri Advaita appeared to hold the upper hand. Soon the battle spread. Sri Nityananda, Sri Gadadhar Pandit, and Sri Puri Goswami. This threesome was locked in a fearsome exchange of water splashing. Srila Mukundadatta dueled with Sri Murari Gupta, both roaring like lions in jubilation. The two intimate friends, Sri Pandit Vidyanidhi and Srila Swarup Damodar, laughed and splashed water at each other rather more sedately than the others. Srila Srivas Thakur, Sri Ram Pandit, Sri Rama Pandit, Srila Haridas Thakur, Sri Bhakeshwara Pandit, Sri Gangadas Pandit, Sri Gopinath Acharya, Sri Chandrasekhar Acharya, and so on, all intoxicated with Chaitanya Ras, soon joined in. Hundreds of thousands of people celebrated the joy ride of Sri Madan Mohan and Sri Baladev upon his boat and entered the water in great jubilation. The householders, sannyasis, and brahmacharis all mingled together and joined the water sports in the Narendra-sarovara. However, such was the influence of Maya, the deluding potency of the Supreme Lord, Sri Krishna Chaitanya, that unqualified people were not allowed to enter the circle of Vaishnavas, nor could they see the Vaishnavas' transcendental activities. Those with insufficient piety and good fortune are ineligible to enter the company of the followers of Sri Chaitanya. The Lord is only captivated by unalloyed devotion, and without bhakti, nothing of value is achieved. Material education, learning, penances, and austerity, etc., inevitably lead only to more suffering. The Supreme Lord Sri Krishna Chaitanya performed his Sankirtan pastimes with the greatest divine pleasure openly before the eyes of everyone in Nilachala, but not all could realize their transcendental nature. Many sannyasis respected as Mahajans, great souls, had not the good fortune to recognize the Lord. Some Mayavadi sannyasis and so-called renunciants criticized the Lord, saying, "What is this Chaitanya doing, leaving aside Vedic study and simply wasting time making clamorous kirtan? He should rather follow the sannyasi discipline of pranayam, etc. Instead he is dancing, crying, etc." The more elevated of those sannyasis said, Sri Krishna Chaitanya is a great soul. He is very erudite and knowledgeable, without doubt an exalted devotee, and other similar praises. Yet they praised him without truly understanding his actual position. Undisturbed, the Supreme Lord continued his water pastimes. In the past, in his previous incarnations, the Supreme Lord had performed water sports with his associates in the river Jamuna and Janavi Ganga, thus rewarding those rivers with great mercy. Now was the turn of the Narendra-sarovara to receive the same unlimited mercy. The merciful Supreme Personality performed innumerable similar transcendental pastimes for the liberation of the conditioned souls. Hearing and narrating these pastimes frees one from the shackles of fruitive reactions. Sri Gaurasundar gathered all the Vaishnavas together after the water sports and proceeded to take darshan of Lord Jagannath in his temple. Sri Gaurasundar and the devotees began to shed unrestrained tears of joy as they took darshan of Lord Jagannath, and the newly arrived Srila Advaita and his party were besides themselves with spiritual exhilaration. The devotees offered prostrated obeisances to the motionless Jagannath in his deity form on one side, and to the moving Jagannath, Sri Krishna Chaitanya, on the other side. Sri Kashi Mishra, then brought the prasadi flower garlands of Lord Jagannath and gave them to Sri Gaurasundar, who received them with the utmost devotion and respect. He did this to instruct and teach everyone by his own example, being the Supreme Lord who is now, by his Leela, in the renounced order. He alone truly knows the spiritual significance of the Vaishnavas, Tulsi, the Ganga, and the objects that are prasadam, and the need to respect these items with total devotion. He showed everyone the unique spiritual position of the Vaishnavas by directly offering them his prostrated obeisances, even though he was in the most highly respected position of sannyas, the renounced order. The religious order of sannyas is the most elevated in human society. In fact, the father of a sannyasi son must offer respects to his own son. Being in the highest order, generally a sannyasi will offer obeisances to only another sannyasi. This is the Vedic etiquette. However, in order to teach the world the exalted position of the Vaishnavas, the Supreme Lord Sri Krishna, in his incarnation as Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, embraced the renounced order of sannyas and offered respectful obeisances to the Vaishnavas. Thus, the Lord fulfilled his role as the original Siksha Guru, instructing spiritual master by his personal example. Now hear attentively how the Lord showed respect to Tulasi Devi in his divine pastimes. Once the Lord filled a small pot with earth and appeared to see Tulasi in that pot, saying, I feel despondent like a fish out of water if I do not see Tulasi. When he chanted upon beads, his prescribed rounds while walking, someone would carry the Tulsi pot in front while he walked behind, so that he would have continual darshan of Tulasi. Tears of ecstasy cascaded down his cheeks, and when he sat down to chant, the Tulsi pot would be placed right next to him. All through his chanting of prescribed rounds, he would have darshan of Tulasi. Who can understand the pastimes of the Supreme Lord in his mood and performance of Bhakti Yoga? When he had finished his prescribed chanting, he would have Tulsi carried ahead of him. Those sincere souls who take to heart the guidance of the Supreme Lord as the supreme instructing spiritual master will always be protected under all circumstances. After offering obeisances to Lord Jagannath, Sri Gaurahari and the devotees returned to their residences. The Lord fulfilled the desires of all his devotees. He took care of them like a father to the son, and the devotees stayed by the Lord's side at all times. All the devotees from Bengal and Nilachala did not want to leave the Lord's association, having experienced in his company the highest level of Krishna consciousness. By the mercy of the Lord, everyone could see the Vaishnavas from the spiritual world of Svetadvip. Sri Advaita repeatedly commented, "These exalted Vaishnavas cannot be seen even by the demigods, but by your mercy we are so fortunate to see them." Then, weeping in gratitude, Advaita would fall at the lotus feet of the Lord. Certainly, these Vaishnavas are incarnations from the spiritual world, who by the arrangement of the Lord descended upon this earth before his appearance. Shankarshan, Aniruddha, and Pradyumna incarnated as Lakshman, Bharata, and Shatrugna to assist the Lord in his earthly pastimes as Lord Rama. Similarly, by the order of the Lord, these Vaishnavas have incarnated from the spiritual world to assist Lord Chaitanya. Thus, they are not subject to the cycle of birth and death like ordinary mortals. They incarnate with the Lord and then disappear when the Lord withdraws his earthly pastimes. The Padma Purana confirms that they are transcendental to the rules of religiosity and the laws of karma. Just as Sumitra's son, Bharata, Lakshman, Shankarshan, and other forms of the Supreme Godhead incarnate upon the earth by their own sweet, independent will. Similarly, the eternal associates of the Lord, the Vaishnavas, incarnate upon earth with the Lord. When the Supreme Lord returns to his supreme eternal abode, the Vaishnavas, their duties completed, also return. Just as Sumitra's son, Bharat, Lakshman, Sankarshan, and other forms of the Supreme Godhead incarnate upon the earth by their own sweet, independent will, similarly, the eternal associates of the Lord, the Vaishnavas, incarnate upon earth with the Lord. When the Supreme Lord returns to his supreme, eternal abode, the Vaishnavas, their duties completed, also return. Certainly, the Supreme Lord Vishnu and his eternal associates, the Vaishnavas, are not subject to birth, death, old age, and disease due to karmic reaction. In the Lord's association, the devotees always experience the ecstasy of Krishna Prema. Those pious souls who hear these narrations with devotion are fully ensured of obtaining the association of the Lord and his devotees. I, Vrindaban Das, offer this song at the lotus feet of Sri Krishna Chaitanya and Sri Nityananda, who are my heart and soul. So this is chapter 8, the Narendra-sarovara water pastimes of the Antya-lila. Now, Hari Haraya Nama Krishna Jadavaya Nama Jadavaya Madhavaya Keshavaya Nama Gopal Govinda Ram Shri Madhusudan Giridhari Gopinatha Maranama Sri Chaitanya Nityananda Sri Advaita Chandra Janardan Shiva Sadi Gora Bhakta Vrinda Jai Rupa Sanatam Bhatta Raghunath Sri Jiva Gopala Bhatta Dasa Raghunath Jai Shri Rupa Sanatana Bhatta Raghunath Sri Jiva Gopala I lost my focus. So, start again. Lost focus because I was thinking of how when I was reading, I mean, sometimes the words chosen are really different for me.
You mean in the translation?
Yeah. Okay, outside, hello.
You guys, I'm sorry.
Hare Haraya Nama Krishna Janavaya Nama Hare Haraya Nama Krishna Janavaya Nama Janavaya Madhavaya Keshavaya Nama Janavaya Madhavaya Keshavaya Nama Gopal Govinda Ram Shri Madhusudan Gopal Govinda Ram Shri Madhusudan Giridhari Gopinatha Madanaman Giridhari Gopinatha Madanaman Sri Chaitanya Nityananda Sri Advaita Chandra Sri Chaitanya Nityananda Sri Advaita Chandra Taranara Shiva Sadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Taranara Shiva Sadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Jai Rupa Sanatana Bhakta Raghunath Jai Rupa Sanatana Bhakta Raghunath Shri Jiva Gopala Bhatta Rasa Raghunath Shri Jiva Gopala Bhatta Rasa Raghunath H.I. Gosai Kori Charana Bandhan H.I. Gosai Kori Charana Bandhan Javate Vignana Shabishta Puran Javate Vignana Shabishta Puran H.I. Gosai Jarmui Taradas H.I. Gosai Jarmui Taradas Tasavar Bhara Renu Mora Panchakras Tasavar Bhara Renu Mora Panchakras Radha Chanana Sevi Bhakta Sanivas Radha Chanana Sevi Bhakta Sanivas Janame More Amilas Janame More Amilas H.I. Gosai Jambe Braje Kolabas H.I. Gosai Jambe Braje Kolabas Radha Krishna Nitya Leela Korila Prakash Radha Krishna Nitya Leela Korila Prakash Anande Bolo Hari Bhaja Vrindavan Anande Bolo Hari Bhaja Vrindavan Shri Guru Vaishnava Bhare Majai Aman Shri Guru Vaishnava Bhare Majai Aman Shri Guru Vaishnava Padma Korean Shri Guru Vaishnava Padma Korean Harinam Sankirtana Kore Naratam Das Harinam Sankirtana Kore Naratam Das Shri Guru Vaishnava Padma Korean Shri Guru Vaishnava Padma Korean Harinam Sankirtana Kore Naratam Das Harinam Sankirtana Kore Naratam Das Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Krishna Jai Saparikara Shishi Guru Guranga Gandharvika Giridhariju Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Srila Bhakti Nirmal Acharya Maharaj Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Paravajaka Ashtatara Sadashi Shrimad Srila Bhakti Sundar Govinda Dev Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Paravajaka Ashtatara Sadashi Shrimad Srila Bhakti Rakak Sridhar Dev Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai. Jai Bhagavan Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Thakur Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Srila Gaur Kishore Das Babaji Maharaj Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Srila Satchidananda Bhakti Vinod Thakur Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Vaishnava Sarvabhauma Srila Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj Ki Jai. Shri Rupa Sanatana Bhatta Raghunath Shri Jiva Gopal Bhatta Das Raghunath Shad Goswami Prabhu Ki Jai. Premsigo Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasni Shri Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Vishvavaranya Srila Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Vrindaban Das Thakur Ki Jai. Shri Chaitanya Bhagawat Ki Jai. Srila Krishna Das Kaviraj Goswami Prabhu Ki Jai. Shri Chaitanya Charitamrita Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. Shri Navadip Dham Ki Jai. Shri Ram Mayapur Ki Jai. Saparshada Shri Nityananda Prabhu Ki Jai. Saparshada Shriman Mahaprabhu Ki Jai. Shri Kuladvip Ki Jai. Shri Chaitanya Saraswat Mat Ki Jai. Soquel Shri Chaitanya Saraswat Sevashram Ki Jai. Ganga Devi Ki Jai. Tulasi Madharani Ki Jai. Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Shri Vrindaban Dham Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Go Gopi Govardhan Sham Gana Radha Kunda Kalindi Yamuna Jo Ki Jai. Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Shri Harinam Sankirtan Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Srila Bhakti Kushamashram Maharaj Ki Jai. Shri Vishaka Devi Dasi Ki Jai. All the assembled devotees Ki Jai. Gaur Premanandi Hari Hari Bol.
Today's Goswami Maharaj.
Oh yeah, yeah, I said that earlier. Jai Srila Bhakti Sharanga Goswami Maharaj Avirbhav Mahotsav Ki Jai. Gaur Premanandi Hari Hari Bol.